Alrighty. Okay, Dark Bleatings, everybody. I'm very excited because we have returning guest Richard Dansky, the trilogy. This is now Richard. This is the third time, so this is really fun. And you have a brand new book out, which I'm dying to talk to you about. And welcome back to the channel, and thank you for being here.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me back.
For the uninitiated, would you like to tell people a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about the new book?
Sure. So, my name's Richard Dansky. Write fiction, video games, tabletop role playing games, graphic novel now. I started working for White Wolf on the World of Darkness back in the 90s. And then I started writing fiction. And then I spent 26 years in the video game industry where I spent a lot of that time pretending to be Tom Clancy. But I've worked on games like The Division and Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and Splinter Cell and many others like that. And yeah, I just love writing. And I've got a brand new book out now called Ghosts of Smoke and Flame, which is the story of a family that wakes up one morning to find they've died in a fire. And mom has gone to heaven, but dad and twin daughter are left behind as ghosts. Mom doesn't want to be in heaven without them. They may have a reason for having been left behind. And both heaven and hell start taking a kind of unhealthy interest in the family. And that's
Mhm.
where things get really amusing.
Yeah, it was a fascinating book and I found it's really unlike anything that I've read that you've written before. And the only thing that it reminded me of, and I mean this as a high compliment because I really love this series. The only thing it reminded me of a little bit was Anne Rice's Memnoch, I'll always say it wrong, Memnoch the Devil, which is
Mm-hmm.
in her Vampire Chronicles series, and that was because of the religious themes and the subversion of what I would expect in the
Mm-hmm.
religious themes. But there's a lot more going on than religious themes in your book, but it was um a central point for me. Um and something that I really liked about it that is in my written review is that it didn't feel opinionated in the prose either way about the religious aspects. It was just like a function of the story and really interesting function of the story because it's really fun when you get, I don't want to talk too much about the finer details, but it's really fun when you start getting angels behaving in unexpected ways.
Well, the joke was that I've heard the book described as Good Omens meets the Amityville Horror, and
Mm,
there's a certain amount of truth in that. I also reference Eric Kripke, who was the showrunner on Supernatural,
yeah.
and before they brought the character of Castiel on, he had a conversation with his writers' room, and he said, I believe this is a direct quote: "What if we had angels, but they were dicks?"
Yeah.
And that's a really interesting starter thought for, okay, yes, angels, but what do angels mean? There are these symbols, there's all these associations attached with them, there's this mythology and lore and expected behaviors, but let's play
Mhm.
with it and see what we can do with that that's unexpected but still interesting and respectful to the original source material. And I did that with angels. I've been doing that with the devil for quite a while. The last collection was
Mhm.
Meeting in the Devil's House, which had some very different takes
Mhm.
on the devil. Not because I have a dog in that fight, religiously speaking, but more because it's a fascinating literary device, fascinating character that carries with it all sorts of associations I can play with.
Yeah, I'm not religious at all, but I have read the Bible a couple of times and I am quite fascinated with any biblical elements that come up in horror
Mhm.
because I'm a bit careful how I say this because I don't want to offend people who are religious, but I do think that the Bible is a really great source of horror depending on what you're taking from it as inspiration or characters. And the devil is used quite a lot in horror fiction.
Mhm.
But it was really fun to see other elements um of these stories and sort of I feel like lesser known biblical elements that most people, unless you read the Bible, you might not know about certain things in there. So it was really, really fun to see you bringing in a bunch of really unexpected elements. And I did catch the the Kripke um reference there because yeah, you don't often see angels being dicks. But they potentially a scary. You could use them as scary characters though, because they
Mhm.
are very powerful, otherworldly beings as well. Um, I think I wanted. I'm so sorry if you could hear my cat in the background. He's started yelling at me.
I
Um,
am pro cat. I am totally pro cat.
okay.
And Ghost of Marriage the cat was the smartest character in the book. This one, Patches the cat, not the smartest character, but definitely at least still smart.
Yeah. Because if anyone can hear the weird yowling, he's absolutely fine. That's just how he sounds when he's talking to us. Um, I wanted to start with this book. First of all, great opening line. I was
Thank you.
one of the best opening lines I've ever read. But I wanted to start with the the conversation around what is potentially lurking in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and why you chose the basement in particular as a location for something scary.
Well, that was playing a little bit with the classic horror tropes. Oh no, don't go down the basement. It's dark. The lights
Mhm.
are out. There might be something down there. The basement is where you bury things.
Mhm.
But it's also a metaphor, and here's where my literature degrees get me in trouble. Um, there are buried things in even in this happy family. They do love each
Mhm.
other. They do have good relationships with each other. But even then, there are things they have buried and kept from each other. And
Mhm.
so the basement being where the badness starts is very much a metaphor for the things that have separated them after death and
Mhm.
the things that got them there in the first place.
Yeah. It's usually the basement or the attic if you're talking something scary at a house, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought that the basement worked really well. In the UK, we don't tend to have basements, but we're very familiar with basements because of American film and TV, and they are just scary places to us, generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking. Um, the Oh, the house fire, I thought the way that you use that was really interesting because the our ghosty characters are confined
Mm-hmm.
basically to the house, and the second floor is in disarray because of the fire. So I really liked the way that sort of that you used the levels of the house.
Mm-hmm.
I found that they it was like running parallel to what they were going through in the stories in terms of what felt accessible to them. So they're kind of in this middle ground. The basement is scary,
Mm-hmm.
and then the top part of the house is a little bit all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Um, was that a conscious decision, or did that just kind of come out subconsciously as you were writing it?
That was a conscious decision. I wanted the ground floor was everybody's space. It's level. It's
Mhm.
accessible. Upstairs, everybody has their own unique sort of spaces. You know,
Yeah.
particularly the bedrooms, and then the basement. Basements are places where you don't live if you
Mhm.
don't have to. A lot of times,
Yeah.
basements are not people places. Um,
Yeah.
your laundry room is down there. Your furnace is down there. Storage is down there. And
It's where you put
but
things you kind of forget about.
or that you don't want to or have to deal with moment to moment. They're
Yeah.
necessities, maybe, but they're not the stuff you want staring you in the face every day. And and so the geography of the house
Mhm.
was a part of the stories that were being told in the house, and the space played into what sort of action happened in each moment.
Yeah. Did you when you started writing this, did you know what age you wanted to make the daughter?
Yes, and this is going to get me in trouble. I I wanted her to be tween for a couple of reasons. One,
Hmm.
I had a niece who was at that age at that time, and I totally wanted to be able to pick her brain to get the dialogue right.
Yeah.
And two, bearing in mind that I don't have kids, I just have met some. Um, Tween is sort of like the last boundary before the interests start going really outside of the house,
Hmm.
where they form romantic relationships outside of the house. And so I thought that having a child who was in that space who still had their sort of boundaries defined by their core family relationship
Hmm.
would be stronger for the story that I wanted to tell. If there had been a boyfriend or a girlfriend, then that would have taken the story in directions that I don't think would have served the overall arcs as
Hmm.
well. It would have blurred the focus a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my thinking about the age of the character was that it was perfect really cr for the creation of some family strife between her and her dad, even in the predicament they're in, because tween is that's kind of the age group as well where kids are sort of figuring out who they are
Mm-hmm.
and their personalities are being shaped um, by their interests, and it's not entirely based on how their parents see them and how they
Mm-hmm.
respond to their parents. And it's funny, I was talking to a parent. I'm also not a parent, but I was talking to a
Mm-hmm.
parent earlier that was saying about the fear when your kids hit that kind of age, you panic that they're not going to like you anymore
Mm-hmm.
because every tween kind of goes through a my parents are so embarrassing phase, and all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden you lose that feeling of being your kid's hero because they have opinions outside of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that worked really, that was like the perfect age I think you could have made that character.
Well, thank you. And yeah, there's a moment in the book, I'm not going to give spoilers, but where she is trying to step up and make an adult decision and take adult responsibility for something she did.
Hmm.
And that I think is an important moment because that's the age where that sort of stuff starts happening. And it's really, in a lot of ways, what the whole story hinges on.
Hmm.
And I wanted to give her that agency. I don't, my characters aren't always right.
Hmm.
And frequently they make mistakes that have bad consequences for them or other people, but I always want their decisions and their choices to be appropriate for who they are. And that felt really appropriate for someone who is figuring out who she is and the enormity of what she's facing. And I thought it was honestly very brave of the character to step up and do that.
Yeah, I they were really layered. I could really see them straight away. The way that you wrote the dialogue between them and stuff as well. Like I could really picture them, and I liked the way that you used um guilt as a I was going to say like a driving factor because it was more in the background initially, but things that people feel guilty about and the weight in their own mind about
Mm-hmm.
whatever their crime was, compared to how everybody else would view it and the perspective. Um, I loved how you used that because when we're normally talking gothic stories or stories about death, it's usually people who are still alive that are carrying guilt about
Mm-hmm.
maybe the last time they saw the person, they didn't pay them enough attention, or they wish they could take something back they'd said and things like that. So it was really interesting to see it playing out between two people who are dead. um,
Mm-hmm.
and wondering why they haven't gone to heaven or moved on anywhere else and what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I got my professional creative start with the game Wraith the Oblivion, which is a
Hmm.
tabletop role playing game about playing ghosts. And I've always been fascinated by ghosts. I've always read M.R. James, and I love classic ghost stories. And I try to divorce the ghosts of this story from Wraith, my experience there, but at the same time, I've there's that core fascination of why is a ghost sticking around? What
Hmm.
is holding them here? And what I circled in on for this story was their own, they're the thing keeping themselves there.
Hmm.
And nobody knows you the way you know you, and nobody sees things the way you do. And something that is tiny to you can, or something that is tiny to other people can be huge to you, and vice versa.
Hmm.
Honestly, a little bit of the inspiration for this came from something that happened to me when I was 5 years old, and it's very embarrassing. I was in kindergarten, and there was a moment when I did not know what a tape recorder was, and when the teacher played back something on the tape recorder, and the voice on the tape recorder asked for volunteers, I stuck my hand up, and all the teachers and students laughed at me because they knew it was a tape recording and I didn't. And I carried that for years. as a moment of humiliation, and everybody else forgot about it by the next day. But
Hmm.
that difference between the way I felt it and the way everybody else felt it. Um,
Yeah, I think anything involved with shame, it's so weird, isn't it? I have things that I was embarrassed by as a kid or something I
mhm.
felt bad about as a kid. And it's the kind of thing, when you're falling asleep at night and then all of a sudden your brain goes, hey, remember that shitty thing you said when you were seven? You're like, oh
Yep.
my God.
Yes.
But if you were to talk to anyone else that was even present at the time, they'd have no idea what you were talking about because it was such a nothing thing to everybody
Exactly.
else.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the magnitude of these things because I think embarrassment, shame, guilt are things that you feel so deeply.
Hmm.
Um, and those emotions tend to override anything positive as well. So that's why
Hmm.
a lot of your core memories from when you're young, I think, are things like this rather than like a really happy day you had or something. Um,
Exactly.
when you were I thought that the father-daughter dynamic was really interesting to me because I loved the dad because he just seemed just a generally good guy who's struggling with being a ghost and also not being able to explain why this has happened
Hmm.
to his kid because he doesn't have any answers and he's just as frightened about all of this as she is, and also he's trying to navigate having a tween and the mother isn't there, so this is a kid of the opposite um gender as well to him, so that like
Hmm.
it's another layer of just uncertainty about how to proceed and talk. And yeah, the guilt that he was harboring over the reason that he thinks he's kind of been held back as well.
Hmm.
How did you get into this guy's head with how he was dealing with his daughter?
Um, there's a thing that I do for every character, which I call the 10 words exercise, which
Hmm.
is before I start writing, I come up with a character and I will write out 10 words or phrases they absolutely will say
Hmm.
and why they'll say them, and 10 words or phrases they won't say and why they won't say them.
Okay.
And that gives me tremendous insight into who these people are because your word choice and your voice, uh, they contain so much. It's where you're from, it's your education, your socioeconomic background, your upbringing, what sort of job you work, all that sort of thing is baked into the way you talk. And so
Hmm.
that helps me really, really know these characters very well to the point where when I'm writing them, I sort of instinctively go, okay, he would say that, he wouldn't say that. Here's
Hmm.
how he feels about this, here's how he doesn't feel about this. And I don't think my characters talk to me,
Hmm.
but I do think that I know them well enough to know what they would say if they could. And so I made a point of getting to know him and getting to know Jessica as well. And um, and I let them sort of bounce off each other in a couple of writing exercises. Actually, before I started writing the book,
Hmm.
I wrote conversations they had,
Yeah,
and
it did feel fully formed, the relationship, like straight away. Um, I also really enjoyed the inclusion of the cat. As a cat lover, and my hope would be, if ever I'm a ghost, that I
mhm.
can still communicate with my cats.
I love cats. I miss having cats. I'm actually working on a story now that's basically cat versus zombie.
My two favorite
And
things.
yes, you're going to hate me for this, but the story is called Cat and Mouth. Um,
No, I don't hate you for that at all. That sounds perfect. I can't wait to
well,
read
thank you.
that. Um, so yes, your ghosty characters, and as a fan of ghosts, what do you think? And what do you think is the most interesting thing about a ghost, like as a function for a human character?
Ghosts are people
Hmm.
in a way that a vampire or a werewolf or a Cthulhu tentacle beastie aren't. Even the stuff that starts as human, like a werewolf or a vampire,
Hmm.
has an element that is not human. But ghosts are people. They are people with unfinished business. They have wants and needs and desires. that have been stretched out of all proportion by the experience of death, but they're people
Hmm.
fundamentally. And people are the most interesting thing for me to write about. And so I love taking these characters and saying, okay, this is who this person was, and they die. What is left? What is the hard core of their personality
Hmm.
and their thought process and their guilt, if necessary, that is keeping them around? What is the thing that is driving them past death when most of the rest of us just give up the ghost and become worm food? Um,
Hmm.
so, so there's something extraordinary in every ghost, I guess is the best way of putting it. And I love
Hmm.
finding what is extraordinary about that ghost, the thing that keeps them going, and
Hmm.
telling that story.
I yeah, I really I enjoyed their journey of discovering things about themselves and you know trying to decide what they should do next with
Mhm,
no indication for a while from any other sources about like what's even possible. Um the whole aspect of the afterlife as well, I really enjoyed what you did with it here. Because okay, I'm trying not to spoil anything. I wondered how far you were going to go with it.
mhm,
Because you can go like subtle hints and alluding to things, or you can
mhm,
go full, John Constantine, brimstone and fire with it. Um,
mhm.
did you did you kind of play around with where you wanted to take it in the third act?
I did, and part of my writing process, I describe a lot of times as my subconscious letting me in on the joke 500 words at a time. And I, back here, I know it's going to happen, but up front, I find it as I type in many
Hmm.
cases. But I knew there was going to be a big action movie sort of
Hmm.
finale. I knew I wanted to take it to go outside the house and have much broader space and a
Hmm.
bigger cast and a big sort of set piece as a contrast to the sort of chamber scenes of just people talking in the house.
Hmm.
And I've been doing a lot of research just sort of in that um, mythological space for another project. You read me, The Devil's House, and there's a couple stories with the magical pirate rabbi character, Red
Hmm.
Palash. And so writing his stories, I always do research into Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, and that leads
Hmm.
to angels and demons and Grigori and everything else. And so I was able to sort of pivot to that a little bit and say, okay, what's the fun stuff here that I can really play with?
Hmm.
And while it's not literal Dante and it's not literal um, Kabbalistic texts, all that stuff sort of informed it because that was all sort of swimming in my head already, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Um, I really there's a description of an angel in this book that I was like, yes, because that's actually the biblical description of an angel, because normally you get handsome men like Castiel
Mm-hmm,
or golden ringlets and a harp or something. And I was like, oh, finally somebody has written a biblical angel.
mm-hmm.
Um, and I really enjoyed that. Um,
Well,
because you were working with biblical elements, did you have any concerns about how you were writing them? Just because I, a lot of authors I know are very afraid of causing offense these days. So like, no matter what they're writing, they're worried about it. And
mm-hmm.
a lot of people feel quite strongly about their religion and how it's used in fiction. So I was just wondering if you had any sort of like considerations you wouldn't normally worry about while you were writing this.
I tried to be as respectful as I could with the material,
Yeah.
with characters who I don't share a faith with, but I I had no interest in saying, nope, you're wrong. I had no interest in making anybody look bad. Everybody in that book is a character with their own motivations and
Hmm.
drives and history and things like that. And that I think was my guiding light in terms of writing this book without, for lack of a better way of putting it, fear. I
Hmm.
just wanted to be as respectful as I could. Now, there's almost certainly people who would read it and get offended
Hmm.
because people get offended about lots of stuff that doesn't align with what they want to see.
Hmm.
Um, I had an encounter in the video game industry actually with a fan, and I use the term loosely, who got very upset with some dialogue I wrote for the game Star Trek Bridge Crew,
Right.
where I referenced the alien Horda, which is the little rock pizza things that eat, that tunnel and say no kill eye. And she thought I had used the word whore and would not be convinced otherwise, and was
Oh no.
very upset and very offended. And I sent her the script and she wouldn't believe me. But the lesson there is that there is a subset of folks who will look for something to be offended over, and you can't worry about them
Mhm.
because catering to them denies the vast majority of folks something they might enjoy and get something out of and might find interesting.
Yeah, there's absolutely no way to avoid angering everybody because everyone's got different kind of parameters for um
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I as I said though, like through the prose and everything, I really, really enjoyed those more religious aspects of the story because I I had no idea whatsoever as I was reading it what your affiliations might be at all religiously because
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel preachy or lectury or like you're trying to make a religious point. It's just the beliefs of the characters and what's going on in the story as well. So yeah, I thought you struck a really great balance there. Um and not just with how you handle that side of it, but also like the balance between the relationships and the horror as well, because I came away from that book feeling like it was definitely a horror story, but it's really a story about love to me,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was lovely.
Thank you. And yeah, that really is what I was going for. It's a story about love and redemption, even if
Hmm.
the arc takes a long time.
Hmm.
And yes, I love horror in large part because it's a way of taking real fears and pulling them out of context and putting a costume on them and letting us engage with those real fears in a place that is safe and different, where we can try different stuff and do stuff we can't do in real life, and
Hmm.
come away safe, having engaged with it, and maybe learned something about it, and maybe gotten something out of the encounter.
Hmm.
And so I I've never written horror for the sake of just scaring people or grossing them out.
Hmm.
I view horror very much in that way, in that there is a benefit to the monsters and the violence and the terror and the fear. And I want people to come away from the book with a better feeling, I guess is the best way of putting it.
Yeah, it's I think we must have talked about this on a previous time, but there's people who don't watch or read horror seem to generally have a misunderstanding about why
Mm-hmm.
horror fans enjoy it, and I think they've got a bit of a wrong idea about what the genre actually is and the kinds of stories. Because there is, your slasher,
Mm-hmm.
crazy blood, guts, and gore kind of horror, which is really fun. But I tend to think of it as a genre that like champions the underdog and it's about people overcoming
Mm-hmm.
things. And generally speaking, the horror that I really enjoy are things that have happy endings for people and a nice lesson's been learned or people are closer at the end of it or whatever it is. So I found this novel there are some really scary things in it though, but I did find it like very wholesome as well
Oh,
at the
thank
same
you.
time. Your your scary elements of this book really freaked me out because I I am particularly scared of um like Gaelic folklore about changelings and things,
Mm-hmm.
and anything where the person appearing to you might not actually be the person, but they're doing a good imitation of it, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were details of something that's happening in this book that really creeped me out. And I was like, right, do not read this at nighttime when
Mm-hmm.
people are asleep and I'm by myself, and all of a sudden the house starts making weird noises. Um, I think I think that sorry, I'm being vague because I'm trying not to spoil
No,
anything.
it's okay. We can name her. We can talk about the mother thing.
Okay, yes,
Yes.
yes, it's a mother thing that
Mm-hmm.
the daughter is communicating with, And I think the fact that it was her mother made it 10 times worse because
Mhm.
especially when you're young, your parents are you're like the ultimate safe place kind of people.
Mhm.
Um, and it was just very horrifying.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That was the intent.
At what point during the construction of this story did that come into it for you? Did you always know you were doing that, or did it sort of come up as you were going along?
The exact form came up as I was going along. I knew there would be something that would drive a wedge
Hmm.
between Charlie and Jessica. But I I met the mother thing as I was writing, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Her I didn't know about going in, but it made perfect logical sense with everything I'd written before, playing on all of the best qualities of a child who's missing her mom,
Hmm.
playing on her need for that love and that trust and the guidance, and being willing to follow that because they honestly believe. And so
Hmm.
that's I think the worst thing about that evil character is the way it cynically took advantage of that to
Yeah.
the larger plot.
Was kind of abusing again, perfect age with it being a tween character because that's still the age where you blindly obey your parents as well for
Mm-hmm.
like most of the time, generally speaking. So I was just reading this like no, like hoping that Charlie would appear and just like notice it sooner or but that's the thing about sneaky evil beings.
Mm-hmm.
Um, something I almost everything I have said has started with something else I enjoyed about the book. Um, I really liked the few outside characters that occasionally came in. So we have a neighbor that has taken in the cat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then we've got a couple of boys that break in because they're curious.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're hoping there might be something valuable in the house. And it was throwing me off about which way the story might go because I had no idea if it was going to go the kind of direction it goes in, or if it was going to turn into a story about, the characters are trapped and maybe the house is going to be demolished or other people are going to move into it or something.
Mm-hmm.
Um, were you like throwing us off with those things on purpose? Or were you considering at various points what you might do?
Honestly, those characters were there to support the growth of the family.
Hmm.
And I love Louise. I think she's a great character. Goodness knows I may write more adventures of her in patches someday, just
Hmm.
because she's a great character. But um, you know, I wanted I wanted there to be a little bit of context for the family and the community,
Hmm.
and someone who cared about them, cared enough to take in the cat, and who was trying to do the right thing, and then maybe that led to some bad consequences. Then again, maybe those bad consequences were necessary for the ultimate happy ending.
Hmm.
As for the two boys that broke in, that was the catalyst for Charlie discovering a few things that he needed to discover to drive other elements in the plot. And it made more sense to have someone else trigger that than to have him just figure it out on its own. That moment of conflict, that moment of realization. And it also, deepened his character into what he is willing to go that far to defend.
Hmm. I thought your I thought that what really shone through with all because the pacing is great. It's like it's very it never dragged or felt slow anyway, even though for the majority of the book it's two characters trapped in one place, talking to each other. But it felt like it moved really fast because of the injection of these like various other people and it was illuminating about the world and the opinions of these characters and the house and everything from outside. And I completely lost my own train of thought then because I started waffling on a tangent. Um, oh yeah, I was gonna say, um, I feel like it really showed your experience with sort of constructing like plots and narratives and everything, and all of these character details, because it was so um tightly written and well formed, I thought.
Well, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I I try very hard to make sure that all of the pieces of the clockwork mechanism fit together, and that it is a complicated clockwork mechanism, and everything is in there for a reason and has a purpose and has a function and has a result. And so it's, it's a big Jenga tower, and don't want to pull anything out, but and I appreciate your saying that. It's very kind. I've done so much world building
Mhm.
in tabletop, in video games, and what I have always tried to do is have everything make sense and feel like the world just didn't have the plastic taken off of it.
Yeah,
That
it's it's really fun to read because I think I've told you before I'm like a script nerd and a
Mhm,
construction nerd, and I what I really enjoy is learning about the world without realizing that I'm learning about the world, and I'm just reading and enjoying the story, and then afterwards I'm like, oh, that's what that was there for. But like in the moment that I'm reading it, I'm not questioning why the
mhm,
thing is happening. I'm like, yeah, yeah, your experience with what you're doing really shines through in this book in particular. I think it's a it's a joy to read stuff like this for me, honestly, because I pick things apart so much now, especially when
mhm,
I'm a bit worse for it when I'm watching something rather than reading
mhm,
something. But it is nice for me to realize afterwards that I kind of switched that side of my brain off, and I was just, you know, enjoying the story rather than dissecting it as it was going along.
mhm.
And then I
Yeah.
got to sit and dissect it later for my review, where that's a little bit harder to do sometimes. Um, what would you, so for people who might be thinking about picking this up, what would you like them to know about it before they jump in?
That it is a modern fantasy set
Mhm.
in suburban America that literally goes straight to hell, but in the best way possible.
That's a that's a great way to summarize it.
Thank
Um,
you.
while we are here, would you like to talk about your non-fiction book that
I
came
would
out
love to.
some months back? Um, which I'm so sorry, I have not had time to read yet.
Okay.
Because I just got
It's
it.
90,000 words and I sent it to you last week. It's okay. There will
Yes.
not be a quiz.
Um, but yeah, do you want to tell people a little bit about that? Because I was very excited about this when you announced it.
Sure. The book is called The Video Game Writer's Guide to Surviving an Industry That Hates You.
Mhm.
I've worked as a video game writer for over 26 years now, and I have seen a lot. And
Mhm.
I've seen the same mistakes made over and over again. I've seen bad decisions made. I've seen misunderstandings. I've seen a whole lot of things in place systemically in video games to make writers' lives harder and writing worse. And I thought somebody should say something. And part of that is that writers are really sort of siloed throughout the industry, and we're not really in a position to talk to each other a whole lot most of the time because of NDAs and things like that. And I wanted to sort of create a basis for a conversation about a common body of knowledge, a
Mhm.
common set of techniques, a common set of approaches, best practices that we can all pick up and use to make our lives better and easier. And this is, to paraphrase Liam Neeson, certain set of skills I've acquired over the course of a long career. And I found things that work, and I found techniques that work, and I found ways to bring other people on board where a
Mhm.
lot of times the relationship is set up as adversarial. And I wanted to write the book about that. And I don't think it's definitive. I don't think it's the be all and end all, but I'd like it to be the start of a conversation.
Mhm.
And I'd like it to be a place people can go to and get something useful from and make their lives and their jobs better.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like it, but I love these types of books about industries that there isn't a lot of
Mm.
first person perspective on. And what do you think are some of the biggest challenges for people trying to go into that industry now?
Okay. Well, the big one obviously is AI.
Yeah,
And that is a whole other conversation. I am resolutely anti AI for a whole lot of reasons.
same here, yeah.
But leaving that aside, the biggest issues are that writing for video games and narrative for video games is not something that is well understood by people on the decision making level, by people in other departments. They don't understand how it works. They don't understand what it's for. They don't understand how it can benefit them and make them money. And they don't know how to support it with good pipelines so they get the best work possible.
Hmm.
And what ends up happening is, say, um, level design slips and art slips, and everybody, and the time that was set aside for writing gets crunch, 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 crunch.
Hmm.
And in the meantime, the back end can't move because the recording studio dates have already been set up and you can't move them because that's locked in and expensive. And the actors are locked in and expensive. And if you move, you might lose them. And so the writing time shrinks and shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, which means you don't have time for iteration and polish and fixes. And meanwhile, other departments are changing stuff on the fly. And so you end up with something that is maybe not as polished and not as iterative and not as um, supported as some of the other aspects of the game. And that's bad for everybody.
Hmm.
And that's the sort of thing I want to stop. And just to backtrack a little, there's a ton of books out there about how to write for games,
Hmm.
how to write dialogue, how to write cutscenes, things like that. And a lot of those books are fantastic. And friends of mine have written several of them, and I recommend them gladly. The work of Evan Skolnick and Toya Finley. Just go get those books if you're interested in writing for video games. But there was not really something about how to do the job moment to moment, how
Hmm.
to survive in the role in a professional environment. And this is not something that was being taught in schools because that's not their context.
Hmm.
But there was nothing out there to train people in how to survive a table reading with senior team management, how to build a good feedback loop so you get the actual stuff you need to make your scripts better
Hmm.
from the right people who know what they're talking about. And that's a lot of what I want to communicate here, the survival tools day to day.
I had a feeling that it might be like that because I know that in so a novel or a book is a bit of a different beast because it's a less collaborative process for like the overall product. But obviously, if we're talking games, TV, and film, there's a lot of people involved and a lot of different parts of the process. And I very often hear people complain about like the writing with TV shows, for example. They'd be like, "Oh, what were the writers doing?" And like so often, I just like I do you know you don't even know how much of that is the fault of the writers though, because I know there was a big strike a few years back because they'd they'd have like the writers of a TV show would spend, quite a bit of time writing, and then they'd keep the writers on staff during production as well. So if something needs to be changed or something, there'd be a writer on hand to um, you know, modify a scene or whatever. And then
Mhm.
they started cutting the writing part off as soon as the script's done. The writers are not involved anymore. So when changes are made further down the line, it's not the actual writing staff making the
Mhm.
decisions or changing the dialogue. And then
Mhm.
but it's always the writers that get blamed if people aren't happy with what they're watching. And I assumed it might be the same in games if people are complaining about narrative decisions or whatever, because there are so many moving parts.
There really are. And part of it is just the logistics of game development, where you'll be working on a game and surprise, surprise, the world will come down one day. Hey, we're cutting 8 levels. And all of a sudden, you have to take all the storytelling that was in those 8 levels and just redistribute it somewhere else. All the
Mhm.
characters that are now cut, their stuff's got to go somewhere else, and you got to do that on the fly. And a lot of times, it's rushed, and you're doing the best you can, but you're putting band-aids on, sucking chest wounds at times like that. And also, you're dealing with people who don't understand writing and in a lot of ways don't respect it.
Mhm.
They think that because they can write an email, they are writers,
Yeah.
and they're not professional level writers. And there's a lot, since people can use the basic tools, they think they have expert level experience, and there's a bit of Dunning-Kruger going on there. But it's the
Mhm.
same thing as somebody who could make a hot dog thinking that they're a cordon bleu chef a lot of the times. Not to say I'm a cordon bleu chef of writing, but the point is it is a professional skill, a professional job that requires a professional level of experience and expertise that a lot of people who step into the process don't have and don't realize they don't have or need.
I can only imagine how frustrating that must be though when you've worked so hard on something and then something happens like, oh, we're cutting out a huge chunk and you need to quickly just siphon off everything in those parts into these other parts. And I'd imagine you're on a really strict time frame for trying to, so like all of the hours that you would have put into like forming the story as it is and originally, now you don't have that same amount of time to rethink it. So,
If something's getting cut like that, it's because there isn't enough time or
mhm,
resource to actually do it that way. So
mhm,
you're already under the gun from the get go. That being said, I have seen this happen so many times, going
mhm,
back to the very early days of my time in the industry, that at this point I do what I call writing ablatively.
mhm,
And I will write a story that will have very clearly designed dotted lines and places where if I have to make a cut, I will cut this because it'll be easy to move that stuff.
mhm.
And that way I'm prepared for the inevitable cuts because the cuts are inevitable. And I am already ready with a proactive plan that I can present and sort of drive that conversation. Okay, we need to cut. Here's how narrative is going to approach it, and here is how we will be the most efficient use of resources in doing so. And I can sort of drive that and get a better result, I think, for the narrative than if I sit back and wait to get told, okay, cut this here and this here and that here and that here. Honestly, it's more appropriate to just make a big cut or a couple big cuts than try and nickel and dime it and
Yeah.
slice out 500 words here and a scene there, because that just creates more holes that you have to fill. There's more chances to miss
Mhm.
something. There's more places where something can go wrong. If you just do a big cut, it's it's big and it's painful, but it's one thing to deal with.
Yeah. So you like sort of preemptively planning contingencies just in cases you go. Has it always been like that in your time in the industry, Richard, or is that something that's like happened more over time?
It has always been like that. The scope has changed, and the number of people involved in it have changed, and
Hmm.
the scale of it has changed. But going all the way back to my early days working on the original Ghost Recon, and when I was designing a mission pack for that, and I'd written a story for 12 missions, and then halfway through production, it came back, hey, we can do 8.
Hmm.
Okay, and that taught me a lesson, and I've always tried to carry that forward from there. That was 2002, I don't know, something like that. And um the last project I did for Ubisoft was Assassin's Creed Nexus,
Hmm.
and we started with a list of missions up here and the game ship down here,
Hmm.
and there's nothing wrong with that. No, I'm not blaming anybody, and I don't think
Hmm.
there's no fault to go around. It's just these were the realities that we were dealing with, and we didn't have enough time and resource and people to make this. So better to do this. And since I knew it was probably coming at some point, I was already prepared with, okay, this is first on the chopping block, this is second on the chopping block, this is third on the chopping block. We take this character's speech and it goes over here. This character's plot arc goes over here. This bit of knowledge gets moved to this. And again, being prepared and anticipating that, let it be less painful for me and my team.
Yeah, it sounds like a really useful and essential skill to develop as a writer for so that you're not forever pulling your hair out at every turn. Um, what's what's the most useful transferable skill do you think that you have from writing for games into short stories and novels?
Dialogue.
Hmm.
Writing for games teaches you to write really tight dialogue because the
Hmm.
player does not want to talk, the player wants to play.
Yeah.
And so you want to communicate the maximum amount of information, and whether that is plot information or objective information or world information or character information, you want to make that as punchy and filled with stuff as possible in as short as time as possible.
Hmm.
And so you learn to write really concise, tight dialogues. And occasionally,
Hmm.
you'll have a character who gets long-winded and monologues and whatever, but those are under very specific constraints when there is room to do that, and you're
Hmm.
not preventing the player from doing what they want to do, which is shoot people in the face or whatever. And that is something that carries over really well.
Hmm.
Otherwise, there are such huge differences between writing for games and writing for any linear media. in that writing for games, you're writing interactively. You are
Yeah.
writing for the player, not the character, and you have to consider anything the player may do because the player can do anything they feel like because once they've got the controller in their hands.
Yeah.
And that's a really really big difference. You're surrendering a lot of control. You're writing to possibility, and that's something that a bunch of linear media writers who try and write games can't wrap their heads around. And it doesn't make them bad writers, it doesn't make them bad people. It just means that this is a different type of writing that
Yeah.
they're not good at. In the same way, I think I'm a pretty good game writer, but there's types of writing that I'm not real good at,
Mhm.
and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, it is. It is different. I'm just thinking about like parts in games that are unique to storytelling in a game from like the player's vantage point. I was just thinking about things that writers anticipate in games that players are going to try to do. That I think it must have been Death Stranding or something with Norman
Mm-hmm.
Reedus though, and I can't exactly remember what this was. I saw clips of it and I saw people talking about it that there's a part where he's like had a shower or something and he's in a towel and you can like move the camera around, and they'd written in that because people were trying to look under the towel, and they just
Mm-hmm.
wrote in him like slapping the camera viewpoint or something,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, that's like that's a level of storytelling that you don't have to consider in any other medium. Like I say
Yeah.
storytelling, that was like kind of more of a joke, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I wouldn't even think about things like that, I guess.
Yeah, but
So
that is part of the player's story that as they're playing the game. I
yeah.
mean, the way I've always said is that as game writers, we're making narrative. We're
Hmm.
creating the props and the set and the scenery and the lighting and whatever else, but it's all sitting there as narrative elements until the player comes along, and then when they interact, then suddenly it's their story.
Hmm.
And a big part of our job is running the possibility space so that whatever they choose to do to make their story, have whatever they interact with, however they interact with it, it feels good, it feels right, and it feels like a good story to them.
Yeah.
And so you do have to anticipate, bearing in mind the rules of the game, the rules of the world that are the walls of the sandbox of the story you're writing. In a lot of ways,
Hmm.
what can there's only 12 animations the character can do, so don't write a story that demands that they do something they're not they don't have the assets for.
Yeah. I suppose game characters are more self-insert characters with like choices you can make and everything in the game as well than you'd get no like get in a typical novel. Um, I find your characters in your short stories and your longer works um are they're very fleshed out with their own personalities, and even if you don't agree with all of their choices, you like understand why they're making their choices.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas I suppose in a game, because you are the character, you have
Mm-hmm.
to feel, I guess, like a different type of relatability to them, because you don't want to be running around doing things you don't want to do that feel weird to
Mm-hmm.
you, I suppose.
Yeah, and that's what's going on there. Is this is one of the hidden secrets of the game, right? You want to marry the narrative fantasy to the gameplay fantasy. You
Hmm.
want the player to want to do the things because of who they're playing that the game does well that they
Hmm.
want to do as a player. So going deep dive back to my days writing Splinter Cell, um, Sam's a super secret spy who's doing super secret spy stuff, and so it makes sense for me to create a narrative framework where all of his choices
Hmm.
are in line with him being a super secret spy who can do super secret spy stuff.
Yeah.
And even if it varies moment to moment and there's elements of player choice, it's all leading towards what the game does really well and makes the player feel good about doing and makes the player want to do more of.
Yeah.
And if you make the player want to do a thing the game can't do, like fly the eagles to Mordor, for lack of a better way of putting it, the player's going to get frustrated. They're going to put down the game. And so you really have to work hard to marry. I am playing this character. I am playing the warrior who
Hmm.
has gotten a mind flayer time bomb. And I am, all this. They have things they want to do as a character that line up with what the game does well and gives a
Hmm.
positive experience doing.
Yeah, it's my husband and I are very different gamers.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone that doesn't want really long extended cutscenes because he's like enjoying the gameplay. And I grew up on I'm playing the Silent Hill 2 remake right now, and
Mm-hmm.
I forgot how that game is so story focused and there are so frequently um cutscenes, and they're really slow
Mm-hmm.
cutscenes because I guess they were going for atmosphere, and it's a horror
Mm-hmm.
game, so you want to be scared and stuff. My husband's been sort of like kind of watching me play it, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
I know that everyone loves this game, but every time I look, you're just kind of running through fog. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you don't understand. This game was like really famous because of the story. It was like that's kind of what it's gone down with its fan base over. It's
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it's a bit atypical of what people normally want because it is quite slow in the story department. But,
Yeah, but again, it marries that story, that character to what the game does well.
yeah,
And yeah, you're running around the fog, but the thing you want to do is find out what's in the fog. You want
yeah,
to find answers, and the fog is the manifestation of you not knowing
yeah,
things being hidden from you. And so again, it's a perfect marriage
yeah.
of narrative and gameplay. And maybe the pace is a little slow, but that's okay too.
I
Not
think
everything has to be a bullet hell.
Yeah, I think if you're a horror fan, obviously this is like a game that really appeals to horror fans more than
Mhm.
any other types of fans. And for me, well, this when I'm playing it anyway, this is about me running through the fog, hoping not to find out anything that's
Mhm.
in there. If I hear
And yet you
something, I'm
keep
like,
running because you do want to know, even if you're afraid of what you're going to find out.
it's so scary, but
Mhm.
it's fun. Um, okay, so I'm going to put the links for both books in the description.
Thank
Um,
you.
Is there anything else you would like people to know about at this point? And where can they find you also? Again, I'll put this in the description.
Sure. Well, I am having a wonderful year as a writer. In addition to Ghost of Smoke and Flame coming out, there will be another novel later in the year called Nightmare Logic,
Ooh.
which is about a guy whose nightmares suddenly start creeping into his day to day life, and his friends trying to help him with that. And things don't go terribly great, but it's a horror novel, so what do you expect? And also another short story collection called Letters to the Dead,
Mhm,
and that will be coming out. I believe the plan is for it to release in July at Nikon,
mhm,
and then at the towards the end of the year, hopefully, there will be a graphic novel for the French market, actually,
mhm,
which I was privileged to collaborate with the legendary graphic novel author Mats, who wrote The Killer, and just an incredibly talented writer whom I've had the real pleasure, privilege of being friends with for many years. And he was approached about doing a horror graphic novel, and he said, "I don't do horror, but I know a guy." And so he brought me in, and we were able to develop this really fun story called Bridgewater, which is based around the Bridgewater Triangle of Massachusetts.
mhm.
And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's basically the Skinwalker Ranch with the Dunkin' Donuts attached. It's
Ooh.
this little chunk of Massachusetts, small town Massachusetts, and it's legendary for it. This terrifying phantom hitchhiker and indigenous spirits and ghosts of various wars that happened there before the Revolutionary War, and Bigfoot sightings and giant snakes and UFOs and a cliff that makes people that climb up on it want to jump off, and all these stories crammed in this little chunk of Massachusetts. And I wrote the story with him, which is about a group of folks who go in trying to find the truth, and unfortunately for them, they find it.
Oh my goodness. Oh, that sounds so
Well,
good.
thank you. The
Um,
art is so beautiful. Oh my God, the art is gorgeous. And every time new pages come in, I just sit there going, mm.
oh
And
my goodness. Oh my God, that's so exciting. You've been extremely busy then.
well, I'm not bored this way. And
Um, will you be at Scares That Care this weekend?
I will be at Scares the Care AuthorCon,
Yes.
and I will be there with the new books, and also a special treat. My niece, who I previously mentioned in the conversation, has a little bit of a T-shirt hobby, And so I will be
Oh,
selling some T-shirts she made with a Bigfoot on the front and the word Squatchy AF on the back. And
oh, cool. That sounds really cool. Oh, well, you heard it here, everybody. Make sure if you're going to Orthicon that you find Richard, buy his ways, get your book signed, have a nice chat about novels and gaming and horror and anything else.
Bigfoot, I generally get pulled into at least one conversation about Bigfoot in at any conversation I go or any convention I go to. It's a thing. I lean into it at this point. Uh,
You may as well. Everyone loves talking about Bigfoot.
this is true. I actually last year I entered the world's oldest Sasquatch calling competition. There's a Bigfoot festival in upstate New York, which was the sighting of the most famous East Coast Bigfoot sighting, back in the day. And my girlfriend, who is wonderful and understanding, said, "Hey, let's go to the Bigfoot festival." While I was visiting her, and they have this contest where you're supposed to make Sasquatch noises, and I signed up as a joke, basically. And when I signed up, there were like four people signed up, like, haha, yeah. And then when it was time for the contest to happen, there were 45 in the kids division and 45 contestants in the grown-ups division. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And let me tell you, those kids, they were making noises that should not be coming out of small children's mouths. I don't know how they did it, but those were not Sasquatches. Those were demonically possessed children. And I realized, if the kids were doing this, my Sasquatch call was not going to win. There's no way. So I pivoted and I went full Chewbacca.
I was going to ask if anyone went Wookiee, but yes.
I totally went full Chewbacca, and there's footage of it up on YouTube. Just look for my name, and you will see me going full Wookiee, and the MC's, shall we say, somewhat cynical response.
Well, if I can find that, I'm going to put the link for that in the description as well, because I have to see it
Okay,
now. I love that we live in a world where such a thing exists, where such a contest is a
absolutely.
thing.
It was a thing of it really was a thing of shared joy, and there's 90 of us making Bigfoot noises on a stage to a full you know
Mhm.
amphitheater of people who are cheering on everyone, especially the kids. It was great. It was a wonderful moment of community.
It's so, yeah, there's so few opportunities when you're an adult to just like play.
Mm-hmm.
Like just be silly and have some fun with the thing unself-consciously. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, sounds really fun. Well, no, I definitely have to find that clip, and I'll put that in the description as well. That's what I'm going to do the second we end this call is go
Okay.
find it. Thank you so much for coming back on, Richard. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you. You have so much to talk about. Your career is so interesting, and every new project you bring out, I feel like it's a different facet of you as a writer. And I highly recommend the novel to everybody. So make sure that you check it out, pick it up at Orthicon if you're going. Um, and we probably, well, you came back the second time you came back, it was for our 50th author interview episode. Definitely going to have to get you back for the 100th. It's going to have to be a tradition, I think, but probably see you before then as well with whatever your next release is.
Well, thank you. I always love coming on and talking with you. It is always a delight. And while I have the camera, I'm going to say people should read your short story collection because it was really fun.
Oh,
And
thank you.
yes, so read that, people.
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, thank you, Richard. I feel so
You're welcome.
flattered right now. Oh, okay. Well, yeah, sorry, I'm blushing now. Yeah, thank you very much. You have been a fabulous guest, as always, and I look forward to the next time. And make sure you're keeping me up to date with release dates and things for your new projects.
I will absolutely do so. Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's just absolutely my pleasure. So we will say bye to everybody and bleed.